Yo, what's good, Knicks Nation? Alex Gutierrez here, aka the Stratocaster, here with you on the check-in for another episode of Knicks Weekly. All right, and I'm joined by two awesome guests. We got KFTV.com's draft expert Jeffrey Campbell, and we also got the editor-in-chief and host of, well, let me say, editor-in-chief of the Strict.land and host of Locked On Knicks, Alex Wolf, here with us tonight. Because guess what, Knicks Nation? We got a lot that just happened last week. Thank you for everyone that tuned in last week. We got over 6,000 views live when it came to the draft watch along. We appreciate you. Thank you all for tapping in. But as you know, you saw our reactions. We were all heated. All right. A lot of us on this panel were heated. Knicks didn't do what we thought they were going to do, which is draft somebody. They decided to trade out of it the first round, I should say, completely. So we're going to break that down now that we've had some time to cool off. And we're going to discuss some of the news that we've heard this past weekend. All right, whether it's from Ian Begley, we're going to hear comments from Alan Hahn. So we're going to get right into it. But gentlemen, how are you all doing today?
Doing great, man. Good to be back on. Pumped to talk draft. I'm like you said, I think we're looking at things a little more level-headed now, but pumped to get into it.
Yeah, I'm doing good too. You know, I'm fresh off a trip. I was like away in Florida for a wedding during the draft, so I was like, it was kind of old school. I was like watching on a TV with no sound, and I couldn't load Twitter because there was no service where I was at. So like, once I finally caught up at the end of the night, I was like, they did what? Like, it was a heck of a draft night. I was not super happy then. I'm still not exactly sunshine and roses over here, but you know, we'll get into it in a second, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you, Alex. Like, I'm not thrilled. I've cooled off. All right. I think you said it best backstage. You know, we were It was microwave. We were piping hot, but now we've been left out on the countertop. We're cooling down, so we've had some time to digest it. So, what do you guys? Let's just get some overall thoughts. Alex, I'm going to start with you. What were your thoughts about the Knicks just completely trading out of the first round completely and kicking this can down the road?
Yeah, I thought it was, I don't know. I'm so torn now that I've had more time to think about it. I mean, we were talking about it before we started, you know, before we went live and just talking about how, like, from our perspective, it's a little frustrating, like extra frustrating, because we're like, dude, I just spent so much time talking about all these guys for how long, and then two of the ones that we've been talking about so much end up on the board for the Knicks potentially, in Griffin and Duren. And then, you know, they don't get either of them and they completely get out of the first round. And it's like, I don't know. And there was so much, you know, buzz about the Ivy thing, which we'll get into in a minute with that Hahn clip. But like, I don't know. I think my overall thought is, you know, I've sat back and I've thought about it and I'm like, look, I would love to be proved wrong about this stance. And so I'm staying open-minded. But like, I find it a little disappointing that they had a lottery pick in hand and traded it for 3 picks that are almost assuredly not going to be lottery picks, at least in my opinion. I think it's very slim chance that they end up, you know, conveying inside the top 14, any of the 3. I also just think that it's, I don't know, I don't want to call those like fake firsts or something, but when picks come with that heavy protection, it makes me question, like, how valuable are these going to be in this, like, star trade, you know, that we keep hearing about that has not materialized yet, which is fine. I understand these things happen when they happen. But, you know, there are these picks that are protected, you know, 1 to 16, 1 to 14, you know, for however many years. The best I think they get, other than the Milwaukee one, which, like, that one I just say, are you really banking on that Milwaukee in 2025 is going to be so bad that conveys as like the 5th pick or something? I don't see it. Feel free to be optimistic if you want, but I don't see it. But the other 2 picks, it's like, I don't see a path where they're going to convey as anything good, and that will scare a lot of teams off and make it not as valuable of an asset. Like, for example, we just saw this past year, we have like a perfect example right on the Knicks where they had that top 18 protected pick from Charlotte, which they turned into Cam Reddish. And it's like, Cam's not a star. He's not anything close to that. He's not even, honestly, if we're being for real, like a functional like everyday high minutes NBA player right now. He's still a project. So, that's what you can get with those sort of picks by themselves in a vacuum. And so it's like, how much does 2 or 3 of those equal in terms of value for this star trade that you want to put together? And do you really think that some team is just going to be so enamored with the idea of like quote unquote 4 first round picks that they're going to, pull the trigger on some deal for like a player the caliber of like Donovan Mitchell or someone like that? That's where my reservations lie with how the Knicks approach this whole thing. I can appreciate that they think this was a means to an end, but when you've got a guy like Duren or a guy like Griffin that are pretty interesting high upside bets in terms of Griffin, a guy that like if you can get him fully healthy and get him in shape and he proves that the shooting wasn't a fluke and that sort of thing, that's like a potential, I don't want to say star, but like a potential really useful NBA player. And with Duren, I mean, there's all these indicators that like he could potentially, that's a guy that could potentially be a star at the center position, which has its caveats. But I mean, he looks like he could be a really good player. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. So pretty tough to argue against like taking him and seeing how that works out. And if it did, he might be more valuable than like at least a couple of those, picks combined. So I don't know. It's all in all, I was just kind of disappointed. I'm saying it with much less fervor now, much less anger than I was on draft night, but I still find myself feeling pretty disappointed by how the overall night turned out.
And I'm right there with you, Alex. I was on here, and it's funny that you mentioned about Cam Reddish, and the value of a top 18 protected pick, because I said that during draft night, saying when you look at what that type of pick conveyed or that type of pick got us in return, it was a distressed asset from another team that didn't see a player that they wanted to use in their rotation or they had any means for using, right? And so I still have faith in Cam. I still believe that he can be a player. We still have a wing, and when you watch him, you see the athleticism, you see that there's some capability there. So I'm not out on Cam, but with the pick, it reinforces what you're saying, that what can you actually get with this? But I guess with the front office's overall thought process is that by aggregating all these picks, maybe it just looks a little more appealing to somebody to get. Maybe a Donovan Mitchell, maybe Dejounte Murray, which there's rumors of him being on the trading block as well. But before we get even further that down
young teams
on
when
the
they
docket,
taste a
Jeff,
little bit of
how
success,
are you feeling, man?
you
You were
have
on
to
the
be
show
able to
too.
handle it the right way.
You were with us.
As a result, they're
I don't know if you were as heated
right now.
as some of us on the panel, because he kept it pretty cool. He kept it pretty
Capella
cool, calm,
wins the rebound
collected.
battle, but saves
trying
right
to
to
give
Murray. No one to throw it to.
Light at the end of the
DJ
tunnel,
takes
type of
advantage
feeling.
of it,
How are you
lays
feeling
it in,
now
Spurs
about
by
all
seven.
the transactions?
Dallas, for example, trading
I think the initial
to me, that was
reaction,
probably the biggest
I
shocker
think
of
just
the
like
day.
everybody that was on the panel that we had, I think we were just a little confused, a little caught off guard.
Floater in the paint
But
area.
similar to Alex, I can also say
casually
that
strolling into that.
a couple days
Just got caught
post-draft,
ball watching that time.
whether you want to say it's
Easy
a Knicks
cut.
fan that's trying to talk himself
Dejounte just continues the hot
into these
streak.
moves and what type of sense they make
Trying
in
to
terms
go
of how we're going to build our team going
inside to
forward.
Okongwu.
I will say that from a positive
Got it for two.
standpoint,
DJ.
looking
Now
at the
13
protections from the
points.
Washington pick, the
Dejounte,
2023
look at
pick,
that crossover there.
Hold on.
Freezes Young, rips
before you
him
keep
to the
going,
floor. When it gets the big
replay clip audio is a little loud, so I can't hear
Bates
right now.
Diop. Nice movement without it.
Daniel, if you can,
That's
just
a
turn off
phenomenal play
the
from
audio
Kate.
to the clip right now. All right. Now you should be able to go back and go return to what you were saying. What were you saying, Jeff? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so I think like in the beginning, confused was kind of the best word to describe, overall feelings from draft night. Similar to what Alex just said, I think I've come back down to earth a little bit. I don't think I was too upset about the moves that were made. I guess if I want to start off by looking at things from a glass half full perspective, the Washington pick, which is 2023, even with the protections, is if it does convey, would most likely still be in a better position than the Dallas 23 pick that we have. So if you want to say, okay, we've moved up a little bit in that sense, getting a pick that has more value, okay, that's true. I think The hard part that I'm trying to get around my head is the ability to improve the team, and I think we passed on that a little bit. And Alex specifically mentioned AJ Griffin and Jalen Duren, and you know, from my standpoint as a guy that covered this draft, especially this year, really closely, passing on a 6'11" guy who's 250, great length, superior athlete, and I think has a chance to be really something in this league. That's going to be really hard for me to kind of figure out. I think we could definitely look back and say, wow, what if, and AJ Griffin too, guys at his size and length with his shooting prowess, they don't grow on trees, man. And what do we need on this team? Wings, dominant wing scorers that are versatile, guard multiple positions. We drafted a guard on draft night, and then we signed another one to an Exhibit 10 contract. Of course, you want to have multiple ball handlers on a team, but we're a very, very guard-heavy team right now. And I felt like we had the chance to add a wing, and I'm hoping that we don't regret it too much.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, right? I think as of right now, we're in that period of like, what's the next move? Because they didn't draft anybody. So if you're not drafting anybody, that means you have a plan to go out and go get somebody, right? You have that's a plan to go out in free agency to go get someone, and whether that's Jalen Brunson, Dejounte Murray, that's the question. But before the Knicks did end their night, they actually did draft somebody, right? We got one Trevor Keels out of Duke, guard, or some may say like difficult to know what position he's going to play in the NBA. He's a 6'4" guard coming out of Duke, another Dookie on the team. But Jeff, since you're Knicks Fan TV's draft expert, what do you got for us on Trevor Keels?
Yeah, Keels was a really interesting pick. It's the funny thing about him is if his season stopped after that first game at Kentucky, well, actually in the Garden, his stock would have been crazy high because he did pretty much everything that night. But he's a combo guard, a 6'7" wingspan. He was one of the youngest kids in the draft. He'll actually turn 19 in August. Does a little bit of everything on the court. I would say his biggest strength and NBA-ready skill is really using his strength, specifically his frame, his shoulders, when he's driving downhill. He can really shred defenders off of him, but when he gets to the rim, he finished just under 60% of his attempts at the rim. That's something that he's clearly going to need to be better at. He's also a very right-hand dominant driver, uses his left hand very sparingly. That's another area where he's going to need to improve. But he's a decent playmaker out of the pick and roll. He has good vision. He can really set up bigs with good entry passes. I would say that he has a very high-level basketball IQ. You watch him on the court, and one thing that I love about him is that he's a quick decision maker. So if he gets the ball, he's going to grab it and go. He's not going to spend time dribbling out on the perimeter. You're not going to see him, wasting possessions with his decision making, which I like. Now, the shooting numbers were not good. I think he shot 41% from the field and 31% from three, 67% from the line. So there's going to be some work that's needed in that area. I'm sure the Knicks player development staff probably feels that they can get him maybe a little bit closer to his high school numbers. I think sometimes I see his form when he's shooting, the way that his legs are staggered or sometimes a little bit inconsistent. You'll see the arc of his shot when he has time and he's in rhythm. There'll be a little bit more arc to his shot. When there's not, it kind of has like a straight line path to the rim. But one thing that you like about Trevor Keels is that he's confident. So he didn't pass up shots, even when he had some really rough struggles, especially early in the year. I think it's an interesting pick. Again, I would have loved to have maybe seen adding a wing. If you're going to take Trevor Keels, who's 18, and you're somewhat looking at an upside play, but a guy that has a high floor as well. Again, I would have liked to have seen us maybe look at a wing in that area of the draft, but he's a good player, and I think he definitely has a place in this league for sure.
Awesome. Alex, do you have any thoughts about Trevor Keels joining this team?
Not a ton, honestly. I feel like the Knicks do this to me every year. I talk to a zillion draft people and get tons of different opinions. And, certain names just will never come up, and Keels was one of them. I guess I would just say a lot of what Jeff said. I did see when I would see Keels in terms of like watching the NCAA tournament. Mostly I was watching, obviously, with the Knicks still potentially having, the ability to move up or whatever. I was looking for, Paolo or AJ Griffin. AJ Griffin specifically really interested me. Burn, because they didn't take him, obviously. But, then also Mark Williams and all those guys on there. But like Wendell Moore and Trevor Keels were definitely guys that I was keeping an eye on as well. I think Keels maybe... I'm not quite sure what to make of him, because he's like got that like bulldog build, and I never quite know what to make out of those guys in the NBA. So we'll see how he's able to find himself a position in the NBA, because I worry he might be a little too like small to be a wing, but a little too big to be a guard, if that makes sense. So we'll see how it goes. But I think to Jeff's point, he seems like a worker, and that's definitely what the Knicks always value. So I have no doubt that he went through that like wall pairing workout and crushed it. And if that's the case, then I'd be inclined to believe their scouting department that, he could probably be a contributor sooner than later. Maybe he'll surprise us. I also wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get a ton of playing time in the big leagues this year and spends most of his time in Westchester.
Yeah, I think it's probably gonna be more so in Westchester this first year. I think the Knicks have other plans. We'll see how they execute this free agency with those other plans, but I don't see Keels getting a lot of playing time, especially at guard, since you have Emmanuel Quickly, you got Quentin Grimes, you got RJ Barrett, you got Deuce McBride. There's just so many other players ahead of him. For him to get burned, it's a steep climb. But when I look at Keels, it's kind of giving me a PJ Tucker type of feel, where he's just like that tweener. Like, PJ Tucker's 6'5", but yet he's playing power forward, and he's just stocky, built, strong. And I'm not saying that's what Trevor Keels is going to be, but I'm just kind of getting those type of vibes from him right now. But moving on to another player that the Knicks they didn't draft him, but they gave him an Exhibit 10 contract, so he'll be with the team through Summer League for the 20-man roster, is Jean Montero. And Jeff, you actually wrote about Jean Montero beginning of last season, and has anything changed from when you wrote about him then to now? Have you seen any improvements, or has he been pretty much status quo?
I would say status quo. This is the type of player that I'll give the Knicks credit. You would love to get a flyer on, and sign him to an Exhibit 10 contract. I think a lot of people thought Montero would get drafted. I think probably not the best indicator of the overtime elite league that he played in was that no one got drafted in the top 58 picks. So he is incredibly hard to evaluate. If you watch him, it's very clear that he's a scorer. I think his handle is probably his best NBA-ready skill, can really execute a lot of different types of crossovers, in and out dribbles to be able to create space. His mid-range pull-up game is pretty decent as well. I really love the way that he can kind of navigate tight spaces in the pick and roll, even with a defender on his back. He's very comfortable making, really precision-based bounce passes to cutting bigs. I think that's something he looks really good in. He's a flashy passer. He's going to be somebody that's entertaining to watch, and I think he changes speeds very well. But the reason I say that he's hard to evaluate is because the talent level at Overtime Elite, it's your guess is as good as mine in terms of who else he was playing with on the court. Defense honestly looked like it was optional most of the time for most of the guys playing on the court. So I'm not really sure how he's going to translate. I read a ton of mocks this year, and there were some people that were really high on Montero, and they had him, as a lottery pick or in the 20s or in the back end of the first round. But, again, just really, really difficult to evaluate. A questionable shot selection. Decision-making was rough at times for sure. But if you're drafting him, you're kind of banking on the fact that as a younger kid, he was really highly touted. He won the MVP at the Basketball Without Borders camp, a camp that featured Benedict Mathurin, who was a top 10 pick this year. So this is the exact type of guy that you want to get, take a flyer on. You get him in your camp, and you see how he does.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I think there's another guy that's going to be spending most of his time in the G League if he is with the team moving forward. Alex, do you have any thoughts on Jean Montero?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. Well, so first off, he's only on an E10 deal, which is like a base level deal. He'll see summer league time. Probably what they're going to do is, if he really shows out during summer league, they'll potentially throw him on a 2-way contract. If not, then an Exhibit 10 deal, what it does is it's essentially a camp deal that lets you cut a guy and then give him extra money to play for your G League team. So if they decide not to convert that E10 deal to a 2-way contract, then that's probably the plan, to have him, get a little extra money to play for the Westchester Knicks and preserve that other 2-way spot. Presumably they're going to keep, I think, Jericho Sims on that other one. I don't know why you wouldn't, to be completely honest. Like, the NBA has not rolled back the 2-way rules yet, from what I've seen. If anything, I think they're keeping it basically the same, where guys can still play in like 50 games or something like that with like no practice restrictions anymore, like there used to be. So like, that's pretty nice. I mean, that's probably about as much time as Sims will see. They can always convert him later, but they'll have one other 2-way spot that maybe they'll look to use with Montero. I haven't watched a ton of film. I've mostly just gone word of mouth with him, but I did talk about him a little bit. That is one guy that I did do a little bit of like second round research on, because he intrigued me a bit. Going to OTE and being like sort of one of the first somewhat big name prospects to go there. And I think it kind of hurt his stock if he went undrafted. I mean, for a lot of the early, draft columns last year, he was projected to potentially be like a mid to late first round pick, depending on how things went. So OTE is going to be interesting watching how that affects like the Thompson twins next year too. But like, as far as his game, I think if he works out, that's the type of player that the Knicks are kind of always looking for. He's a flashy passer. I feel like the Knicks, IQ is a good passer and RJ is too, but they're not really that like flashy point guard type. I think Montero's got a little more flair to his game. He also seems like a really good kid. My colleague over at the Locked On Network, Rafael Barlow, did a really nice like one-on-one interview with him, and like just listening to him talk, it seems like he's really knowledgeable about the game, and seems like he's really like a hard worker, which again, surprise, like that's the type of player that the Knicks go for. So I would never really doubt that as far as what this regime values in players, that he would possess those qualities. So yeah, I'm gonna wait and see how he plays. Summer League will be really fun to see if he can kind of stand out, show off some of that passing ability and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But I think there's a really good chance that if he shows out during Summer League, he would probably be option one on the Knicks list as far as getting him on a 2-way contract starting before the training camp or whatever, unless their plan is to get Keels on that, in which case maybe they'll do that. But I think that he's probably a little too high of a pick to end up on that deal, and he'll probably end up on a regular like minimum salary NBA deal.
For sure. Will be interesting to see what Montero does during the summer league and see if he can get to the G League team. But you talk about, Alex, you've been talking about guys that the Knicks want. A guy that the Knicks wanted was Jaden Ivy. Then they tried to move up. They tried to do everything possible. We had a lot of reports day of, even before then, of the Knicks trying to stay active and trying to move up and go get him. And Alan Hahn had a soundbite talking about how the Knicks weren't able to go get him. The Pistons valued him highly, and they didn't really value our players as much, or even our picks. So, Daniel, when you get the chance, just throw up the Alan Hahn clip so that we can all hear it.
I don't get the sense at all that the Knicks want to just dump Julius Randle just to get off of his salary, A, and B, whatever happens with Julius Randle, you could be sure. I'm pretty sure
no, not that one, Daniel.
The Knicks will have him, in the loop on anything because of his
The other one. First one.
A couple of notes on the Knicks the day after the draft. They still would have to make a couple of moves to create enough cap space to make a competitive offer. Dallas unrestricted free agent Jalen Brunson. I know Brunson is a target of theirs. I don't think he's the only target as they head into this free agency period, but they would still have to clear some more cap space in order to make that competitive offer to Brunson. One way to do that would be to waive Taj Gibson. I think if the Knicks went that route, they would strongly consider giving him a new contract later in the offseason. And also the Knicks would probably need to trade one of Nerlens Noel or Alec Burks or maybe even a Cam Reddish to a team that could absorb their salary. And then New York would get pretty close to being able to make that competitive offer to Brunson in free agency.
Go to the number one, Daniel. Go back up into the Slack. And you'll see the Michael K. Show tweet. All right, we're getting there. Don't worry. Well, anyway, as we're getting the clip ready, Alex, what are your thoughts about? Did you hear what Han had to say?
I did. I also see all these tomatoes in the chat. I got to try to control the tomatoes going on right now.
Oh yeah, don't worry. We're gonna have a nice tomato soup. You can make some pizza. We got everything. We got everything going right now. Yes, we all get it. We all get that CP's in Jamaica right now. You know, the Knicks made CP mad he had to go take a vacation.
When life gives you tomatoes, make bruschetta. Anyway, yeah, I saw the Han clip. You know, that obviously, to paraphrase, he basically said, you know, the Knicks called up to 4 to not make a deal happen because they didn't have the assets that the Kings liked as far as their players, the picks available that the Knicks had. So the Kings were unwilling to really move off of that pick, then immediately pivoted to the Pistons, who they also were not able to make a deal with. And, you know, for basically the same reasons, then basically said that the league is less impressed with Knicks players than like Knicks fans are, more or less. And, you know, people that cover the team every day are. I think my overall reaction is just like, you know, and I saw Han kind of, he wasn't arguing. He was just talking this out with people on Twitter today, like, or like yesterday, you know, whatever day it was. And he was, you know, saying, because someone had mentioned like, oh, this is a product of Tibbs, you know, not playing these guys enough. And Han was like, do you think that these teams don't have pro scouts, that they wouldn't be able to parse through what time these guys are playing and value them, you know, depending on like with their minutes load not counting towards it or whatever. And, you know, I fall somewhere in the middle there. I think, though, that the Knicks aren't doing themselves any favors by having a coach that does stuff like playing Alec Burks at point guard for, you know, most of the season and having Emmanuel Quickley not get a shot to do that, because I think probably what a lot of teams' reservations are about like Quickley or Obi right now is like, okay, they look great in these, you know, sparing minutes and sparing, you know, starts or whatever, but like they're not necessarily showing that all the time. And you could argue like Quickley did have sort of a tough start to the season. Obi had his tough moments as well, but I think the end of the season showed us it was kind of just because they weren't able to play through them. So I do think that, you know, if they go into this season, hopefully that should be a lesson learned of like, okay, if you want your players to have value around the league, it's valuable to play them more, so that then you can show like, oh, with consistent minutes, it's not just a flash in the pan that Quickley averaged like whatever his absurd averages were down the last like 10 games of the season, like 21, 7, and 7 or whatever. You know, that's not just a flash in the pan. Obi averaging, you know, 25 points a game for the last like 6, 7, 8 games of the season was not a flash in the pan. Like these guys have that potential. It's not just something that they're doing at the end of the year. And, maybe the answer is somewhere between, Obi at 10 minutes and, a handful of points per game and 35 minutes and, 26 points a game. But if your middle ground is that he's a good 17, 18 point per game scorer, starts flashing the 3-point shooting more, then maybe his value does go up if you have a 50 game sample that says, yeah, that's who he is. And as of right now, the Knicks just don't have those samples for their guys to sell, to these other teams. So it's going to be a whole thing, trying to, I guess, cultivate the value of the Knicks' own players if they hope to chase a, star trade or something. Because right now, just like I said earlier with the picks and stuff, it's how valuable are those picks with all those protections? It's how valuable can you convince an opposing team that your players are if your veteran head coach in the league for as long as Tibbs has been is only playing them for, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes a game. Teams are going to say, well, why aren't you playing them more? And your answer is just kind of I don't know, Tibbs didn't want to, So I think it's going to take a little while to, rehabilitate, or I guess not even rehabilitate, establish their value as better assets. And this hopefully, again, will be sort of a learning experience for the front office and maybe for Tibbs, though I really doubt it'll be. I don't think Tibbs has learning experiences at this point. So hopefully just for the front office when they pick their next coach, whenever that may be.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, now we actually got the clip ready. So Daniel, throw up that clip so that everyone can hear, so that way everyone can understand Alex's whimsical I guess dialogue on what he's referencing, and we're all so we have a better understanding of what Alan Hahn did say.
They did try to move up. From what I know, there was attempts at 4 with the Kings. The Kings said, you have nothing we want. And then your draft picks were meh. So then they tried at 5 with the Detroit Pistons. And the Pistons, I'm told, kind of said, yeah, no way. We want that pick. We're not interested in moving off this pick because we know what's there. They tried to move up. There were no options, no reasonable options for them. And what they learned was they don't have enough assets and there's not enough value on their roster. We put so much value into Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly and Quentin Grimes because we see them every day. And as fans, you just say that these are our draft picks. We fall in love with them. They're our kids, and it's you can't trade these guys. And the other teams are looking going, those are not starters in the NBA. So we need starters if you're going to trade for a high-end pick or a high-end player. And the Knicks don't possess that right now.
Yeah, so there you have it. That's Alan Hahn giving his thoughts on why the Knicks weren't able to move up for Jaden Ivy, and Alex already gave his thoughts on it. So Jeff, I'm going to go over to you before I give my thoughts on the whole situation. What do you think of Hahn's monologue on why the Knicks weren't able to move up for Jaden Ivy?
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of understood with what he was saying. And I don't think I have an issue with what he said, because I think as the way things are currently, he might be right. I think, and to Alex's point, the reason that the trade value or perceived trade value of some of our young guys is lower, I think one cause of it is that the minutes they're either getting or not getting. But the other thing is, I also think it depends on what team is evaluating them and what do they need on their roster. Because I think a lot of our young guys outside of RJ Barrett have the potential to be really good complementary players to a star, right? You see what Obi Toppin does on the court with the current minutes that he's getting and the energy that he brings to the court when he subs in is super important. What he does in transition is super important. The way that he scores efficiently is really important. IQ does a lot of different things as well. So I kind of agree with what Hahn is saying. Maybe people looked around the league and they said, okay, I'm not trading Jaden Ivy for any of that, because even the sum of all of those parts is not going to equal what Jaden Ivy can give me on the court. which sucks because I obviously wanted Jaden Ivy on this team in the worst way. And I even went on your podcast and I was saying, listen, whatever package we need to put together to get this man in Madison Square Garden, let's do it. But I agree with Han to an extent. But the bigger thing that interests me is that on with the backlash kind of surrounding this past draft, Leon Rose put out a statement that I'm sure we've all read, and he referenced the player development program. And at the end of last season, he referenced the young core. So he's gone out of his way in 2 separate statements to the fans to say that we're going to continue to grow our young core. This leads me to believe, right, that guys like Obi and IQ are going to get more minutes next year. And that may be a thing that Tibbs is not going to necessarily have so much of a say in. If Leon is going out there in public and putting this out there, I'm hoping that this can lead us to believe that. But, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's a wait and see approach at this point. And, look, listen to Han. I get what he's saying. When you look at, if you're taking it for face value, what transpired this past season or even the past 2 seasons with guys like Obi, Manuel Quickly, Quentin Grimes, whoever, yeah, there's not a lot of value in those players because, as Alex and you've spoken on, Jeff, is because they didn't get playing time to show like what their value is actually worth. Now, we saw how they ended the season. Just because they ended the season that way doesn't mean they could have played the entire season at a high level, and maybe it could have, there's always a thought that it could have diminished their value too, right? But we will never know because that didn't happen. We didn't get to see them play. We didn't get to see them work through their struggles, see if they could actually be starters or give us more than 20 minutes a night. At the end of the season, it looked like that. And, of course, being fans and watching this team, being the diehards that we are, we're going to watch every single game. And we know the nuances of their game. We know how they've overcome, whether it's like shooting slumps or just building up their confidence to get out into the open court, right? We've seen that, and we can evaluate that. But other front offices, like they're focusing on their team. And what they need to see is, what in my opinion, is what, the NBA as a fan base sees, like whether it's highlight reels or whatnot, we'll get the numbers like, okay, did they get the 30 minutes per night? Yeah, they did. Okay, and how'd they do? Let's look at the basic counting stats. Okay, cool. They can actually kind of survive in this league. I mean, look, we've seen Anthony Morrow back in the day get traded and have like high hopes for him, right? When he was on the Brooklyn Nets. So if that could happen, I'm more than positive that guys like Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly could be solid contributors in this league. They just need the time to do it. But to go back to Han's point, he's not wrong. But I think leaving out the point of saying, if Tom Thibodeau played these kids and gave them the trust, maybe it could have been different, and they maybe actually do have the value. And I think they do have the value. I think they do have the value in this league. So, but that isn't it. But time to reset. Time to move on to a different segment. Thank you everyone for tuning in for another Knicks weekly episode of KnicksFanTV. Thank you. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit that like button as we're watching right now. We got 1,500 watching us right now, but we only got 340 likes. We gotta kick those thumbs up buttons. Come on, we gotta kick it up. All right, hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Come on, you know what it's all about. This show is also presented by Manscaped. If you guys haven't gotten the Lawnmower 4.0, make sure to do so. Make sure to use the promo code KFTV. Okay. Lawnmower 4.0. We got Tom from Huntington always calling in, promoting how good it is. And guess what? It is that good. All right. Everyone on this team is laced with it. We all like it. We recommend it to you guys. As CP always says, we wouldn't promote a product that we wouldn't use ourselves and that we don't find to be great. So make sure to go out and go get your Manscaped products as well. And guys, look, if you can't catch a show when it's live, we're also available on all audio platforms. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We are there. We are on all audio listening platforms, so you can take us on the road if you can't watch us at night because, hey, maybe you got to wake up at 5 a.m. and you can't stay up until 10:55 to come watch a Knicks show. It's all good. It's all good. But as long as you're tuning in, that's all that matters. And for tonight, because we don't have the soundboard, if you all want to call in and ask some questions or add some comments, make sure to go to the Discord, the KFTV Discord, all right? We see a few of you on the line right now. We got a few more topics, but we're going to take some calls later on. And if not, you can also leave some questions in the chat. TM is scouting out some solid questions and throwing it our way. So you can do that as well since we don't have the phones to dial in. All right, guys, keeping this show moving along. Free agency. Free agency is coming up this week on Thursday. And look, we already talked about it at the beginning of the show. Knicks decided to trade out of this completely. The one thing that I heard enough of on draft night is that the Knicks are making a push for Jalen Brunson. That could not have been said more than enough that night, is that the Knicks are trying to create cap space. We had Jake Fisher of the Bleacher Report say the Knicks are trying to open up, what was it? How much cap space was it? It was like, I think it was like 100. What was it, like 120 some odd million in cap space? 125.
I think enough to be able to make Brunson like a 4 years, $110-ish million offer. So like 27.5 million in cap space.
Yeah,
roughly.
Yeah. So I think it was like 125. So we know that there's, we know the Mavericks are trying to keep him. Their books aren't looking too good, so there could be a chance for the Knicks to come in and get Jalen Brunson. And look, we have Rick Brunson. We have his father on the as an assistant coach on the staff. He's tight with Tom Thibodeau. That was Leon Rose's first client when Leon Rose became a sports agent. What do you guys think about this Jalen Brunson talk and potentially throwing him the bag to come be the starting point guard of the New York Knicks? Alex, I'm going to start it off with you.
Yeah, I've been fully behind this potential move for a while. It's been rumored, and then when Brunson went as crazy as he did in the playoffs, it sort of chilled that discussion a little bit for a little while because everybody's like, oh, the Mavs would be nuts to let this happen. But the reality is they have no leverage in the situation. If the Knicks can create the cap space, then the Mavs have no power here because he's an unrestricted free agent, much like Mitch is an unrestricted free agent. And if some team wants to throw Mitch some money, although obviously with getting Jalen Duren, I guess that's the 4D chess of it all for the Knicks on draft night, is they eliminated maybe the biggest Mitch suitor on the market in the Pistons. But just like that, the Knicks can't do anything if some team wants to give Mitch a bunch of money and has the ability to. So, I think that it seems really likely at this point that Brunson is going to come to the Knicks. I don't know. This is without any sourcing on my part, but I feel like I would probably put the odds at like 80% at this point. That I feel like pretty confident that he's going to end up on the Knicks by really early in free agency. There's just too much smoke for there not to be fire at this point, I feel like. And, that wouldn't be the first time I've said that about the Knicks with a free agent, such as, the guy who plays in Brooklyn now. But this is a little different. Like, Brunson's not Kevin Durant. Like, not every team in the league is going to be lining up to get into a bidding war with the Knicks and the Mavericks for him because he's not like a max level player. He's a mid 20 million level player for sure, but he's not like a max guy. So it's not like every team in the league is going to be like, you have a spot on our team if you want it, and we'll find a way to pay you a max. So I think it's going to come down to the Knicks and the Mavs, but the Mavs also, it seems like, are a little wary of the luxury tax and stuff too. So I think they have a hard cap of how high they'll go. I wouldn't be surprised if what actually ends up happening is that the Knicks line up a couple deals where they can get rid of, Burks, Noel, Fournier, something like that. However many guys they need to get rid of to, make this happen. And then basically just go to the Mavs and say, like, we can either send those guys elsewhere or, like, they are useful NBA players. So we can just send them to you in a sign and trade if you want to do that and get some players back. But either way, he's ours at this point. Like, Jalen's going to sign here. So pick your poison. You want to lose him for nothing, or you want to get, a couple players back. And they'll probably take the latter and just take the sign and trade. But I like what he brings on the court. I think he's good in the sense of he's sort of like quickly on offense, although much better around the rim. Like, that's kind of one of his main strengths other than the 3-point shooting. But like, he's really good in the sense that he played with Luka. So a lot of what made that partnership beneficial was that he's not useless with Luka on the floor, despite being a point guard, because he can move without the ball. He can catch and shoot, that sort of thing, which is sort of like what Quickly can do for the Knicks as well. But then, with the ball in his hands, he's pretty dynamic. I mean, especially during the playoffs, he showed it with all those like 30-point, 40-point games that he had in the playoffs. So like he really does have another gear, and maybe he is really starting to come into his own in this league. So I really like it. I hope that they sign him. That would be sort of a nice consolation prize to getting out of the draft entirely. Although I still feel like if the end game was just getting rid of Kemba, you probably could just stretched him and paid the $3 million a year for 3 years. But whatever, I'm not salty about it. But yeah, so I think, you know, I just would like to see Brunson on this team. I think he'll be good. My only concern, and it sort of goes along with what we were just talking about, is that signing Brunson essentially means you're saying quickly you're a bench player still. And so I feel like they would still have some things to do, and they'll have to do some of it just to create the space for Brunson. But I don't know necessarily if I'm Leon Rose and whatever, if I would want to leave like Derrick Rose on the team necessarily, because then it's like, well, now Tibbs is going to play Brunson a ton, and Derrick Rose is going to get those backup point guard minutes, and what does that leave for Emmanuel Quickley at that point? I guess some shooting guard minutes, but then you have, you know, RJ, Cam, Fournier, you know, let's say Burks goes out in the sign and trade for Brunson or whatever, but you still have Quentin Grimes. You know, there's just so many mouths to feed at the 1 to 3 positions right now that I worry a little bit about what the Brunson signing could mean for Quickley, but is what it is. I think if you get a player that's really talented and seems like he's heading towards peaking sometime in the next few years, and the peak could potentially be really good, got sort of like a Fred VanVleet sort of trajectory going on for him right now, I think you got to go ahead and go for that. So I commend them for, you know, making the push that they're making for him, because nepotism or not, I think he's a really good player. So I think he'll be a good addition.
I'll say like the one thing, because you keep bringing up Kemba Walker and shedding salary on Kemba Walker. I think the biggest thing when it came to that trade is that, you know, the Knicks were trying to trade up for Jaden Ivy, and they were trying to work with Detroit. And the fact that we not only got them the player that they wanted that night, like, sure, yeah, we gave you Kemba Walker, but like Kemba Walker, like, you could stretch down to the Pistons. Like, who else? No one's coming to the Pistons like that anytime soon. You got your young core that you're going to develop over time. We legitimately helped them. We moved the first rounder, probably the better first round of the Denver, Washington, and the Pistons pick that we got in that deal with OKC. But we moved that pick, and then we got a first rounder and gave it to Detroit with Kemba. We gave it, what we got back in return was Milwaukee's top 4 protected pick, which to me is just, we just did you a favor, and this is not, I don't even know, that's not even doing us a favor. I don't even consider that doing us a solid, in all honesty. But that's my side tangent. Jeff, how do you feel about Jalen Brunson and the rumors of him coming to the Knicks?
Yeah, you know, I've been talked into Brunson, you know, to kind of build off a point that Alex was making. I guess I'm going to start with kind of cons for me first. Yeah, man, listen, this is going to be very interesting for Emmanuel Quickley going forward, because we know that Tibbs doesn't like playing small guards on the court at the same time. So presumably you're not going to see a lot of lineups, I think, that feature the both of them in the game at the same time. And again, you know, you have to find minutes for Quentin Grimes. You know, is Deuce McBride going to be someone that is going to get some priority development too? So bringing Brunson to this team certainly adds talent. I think it certainly is going to help you win games, which is what ultimately matters. But you know, in terms of development for the team, and especially some of the young guys, interested to see how it affects it. There was a time where I think I was maybe a little frustrated with what a max deal looked like for him, given his skill set. But people that are way smarter than me and study this cat, you know, a lot, you know, go more deeper in depth than I do, have correctly pointed out that, you know, a lot of the guards that are getting that type of money, you know, Jalen Brunson is certainly not worse than the majority of them. You know, I know Kyle Lowry, I mean, given he's much older and a player that has more establishment in this league, but I believe he's making like 24 mil. Brogdon, I believe, is in the 20 mil range scenario. So Brunson, who's 25 and presumably going to get better, locking up a player like that, while he's either in or approaching his peak is pretty good business, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Brunson as a player. I think the biggest thing that you guys brought up is what happens to Emmanuel quickly. And I wrote an article for KnicksFanTV.com on, the decision to make for Emmanuel quickly and how he's shown himself towards the end of the season that he could be that lead guard, right? You saw the assists go up, you saw the scoring go up, you saw the shooting come back around, you even saw some rebounding out of Emmanuel quickly, and you saw his defense take another step this year's overall, even though he was struggling for half of the season to find his shot. Putting Emmanuel quickly as like your bench guy, I mean, my thought is always for a young player that they're probably striving for a lot more. It's not like Jordan Poole on the Golden State Warriors where in front of him is Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. In front of Emmanuel quickly on the Knicks we've had Elfrid Payton, Kemba Walker, Derrick Rose. Like, I think this is a pretty hard sell to Emmanuel quickly, honestly, if you're thinking for like the long-term future. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Emmanuel quickly, but if it were like, I just think of it from like, we've all been there. Like, we've all been in our 20s. Like, we've all wanted more. We've all wanted to achieve a lot. And we were all like, hey, man, like, why are you putting someone in front of my way from my success? So that's the way I think of it for Emmanuel quickly. And like I touched on that in the article, but it's just interesting bringing Jalen Brunson in. Now, with that said, I do like what Brunson has to offer. I mean, Alex pointed out, like, in the playoffs, dude was a dog. Like, without Luka for the first round, like, he was taking it to the Utah Jazz. So, and you got to respect the jumper. You got to respect his ability, even though he doesn't have blazing quickness. Like, he can get into the paint. He can score over the bigs. Like, he was doing that against Rudy Gobert. So, Brunson's a solid player. I think if he comes to the Knicks, he'll just offer that steady hand. I don't see him being the player that puts him over the top. I just see someone for what we saw this past season as a team that got flustered down in crunch time, that lost its way throughout the entire game. I think he could just hold the entire team together, but it's still not enough to take him to another level where you're going deep into playoffs. But he'll be good. He'll be good enough on the Knicks. But I do want to go into what Ian Begley had to talk about with regards to Jalen Brunson. So, Daniel, if you could pull up the third clip that we got which is the second clip of Ian Begley talking about Jalen Brunson.
A couple of notes on the Knicks the day after the draft. They still would have to make a couple of moves to create enough cap space to make a competitive offer to Dallas unrestricted free agent Jalen Brunson. I know Brunson is a target of theirs. I don't think he's the only target as they head into this free agency period, but they would still have to clear some more cap space in order to make that competitive offer to Brunson. One way to do that would be to waive Taj Gibson. I think if the Knicks went that route, they would strongly consider giving him a new contract later in the offseason. And also the Knicks would probably need to trade one of Nerlens Noel or Alec Burks or maybe even a Cam Reddish to a team that could absorb their salary. And then New York would get pretty close to being able to make that competitive offer to Brunson in free agency once that begins on June 30th. Another note on the Knicks is, once Detroit drafted Jaden Ivy, I know the Knicks had contacted Detroit trying to persuade them to trade Ivy. I'm not sure if Detroit ever strongly considered it, but I do know that there were some in the room on draft night on the Knicks side that were disappointed that it didn't get done. They felt that they had a chance to go up and get him, and it didn't work out. Obviously now the Knicks pivot to free agency when you look for that lead guard spot, and Brunson obviously is a top target there. I know they've talked to Indiana on Malcolm Brogdon. The Kyrie Irving situation's floating out there. I don't see that as very likely, but the Knicks will have some options as you head to free agency with that lead guard role.
All right, so we all heard that. Guys, what do you think about, I think I speak for most Knicks fans. If you move on from Nerlens Noel, I won't speak about Alec Burks like that. I think Burks I know CT will be down and bad if we move Alec Burks. But What do you think about the moves that need to be made, whether it be moving Cam Reddish, Nerlens Noel, in order to get Jalen Brunson? Because I think the Knicks opened up $13 million in cap space after draft night, so there's still more room that's needed. But do you see anyone else, or do you see just the guys that Ian Begley talked about, which is Burks, Noel, Cam? Are there any of those guys that you don't want to see go? Do you care? Alex, I'm going to start off with you.
In a vacuum, I would probably prefer to hold on to Burks, but unfortunately, we have to look at everything through this lens of, well, Tibbs is still the coach. So, you got to plan for that. And unfortunately, this is the same guy that played Alec Burks at point guard out of position all year to be his guy that can break down the defense that then shoots sub 40% at the rim. It's like, I think sub 30% at the rim. It was bad. I mean, his numbers at the rim this year were horrendously bad. And yet that was the role that Tibbs wanted him to keep doing. So it's like, it gets a little exhausting from our perspective to have to keep talking about, like, well, you have to save Tibbs from himself. So you got to take away this productive player because he can't just play him as a wing. He has to put him out there as a point guard for whatever reason. And stifle, quickly and whoever else. So in a vacuum, I would prefer Burks. In reality, I guess I would prefer Fournier, but I do think that's another name that has come up elsewhere over the last week or so. Some of it's just people just posturing, but I think there's been a couple of real reports out there that the Knicks could potentially try to trade him as well. I saw one where people were pondering, like, can Boston take Evan Fournier into the
I did see that one.
Yeah, like, is Boston legally allowed to take Evan Fournier into the TPE that got opened by Fournier signing with the Knicks? Traded player exception, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, because they technically executed a sign and trade with the Knicks to make that deal happen. Maybe that's something that becomes on the table there. I think if you move Fournier, probably him by himself would be almost enough to get you to the amount of money that you need to make a good offer for Brunson. As far as trading Noel, I mean, maybe the cost of doing business of getting rid of Noel is trading Cam Reddish with him as sort of a package deal. That would just feel really disappointing to me. I think that's the only guy on that list where I'm like, that would kind of stink, Like, here's this guy that, we had to sell ourselves on, like, okay, well, the Knicks had the 19th pick last year, traded it for a top 18 protected, 19th pick in a really good draft, by the way. Traded it for a top 18 protected pick, and then traded that pick for Cam Reddish. Then if you're taking that and just attaching him to Nerlens Noel just to dump his salary, when, again, thanks to Tibbs, you only got to see Cam Reddish play in like 4 or 5 actual, like, real playing time games this year. That's disappointing to me. I would look at that and be like, this is kind of a little bit of a failure on the front office here. If all you can manage to do with that first round pick last year is trade it once for a super heavily protected pick, trade it again for Cam Reddish, and then only use Cam Reddish as a sweetener to get off of a deal that you signed last offseason, to Nerlens Noel, who, I mean, honestly, in retrospect, I appreciate everything he did in 2021, but, like, we should have seen a guy with zero offense who has been a toothpick his whole career. Obviously, he was going to be an injury risk. And without having that elite athleticism and defense, he's not very useful on the floor, as we saw this year, because he can't do anything on offense. And can't even do anything on offense when he's fully healthy. So, yeah, I'm with it. I'm not going to be heartbroken over pretty much any of those guys, but trading Cam, having only seen him play such a short amount of time after the Knicks traded, a pretty protected first round pick for him, but still in name at least a first round pick, and not really getting a chance to see what's there. And then if he pops on whatever team they trade him to, that would be really disappointing. The rest of the guys, not really worth shedding any tears over. It's just veterans, and presumably if you get rid of guys like Fournier or Burks, you're freeing up playing time that needs to be freed up anyway for Brunson, and maybe also a little bit extra time for some of the other young guys too. So I definitely would not be upset or anything. I guess my only reservation is if the cost of doing business of getting rid of all these contracts that they signed last year is say trading this like quote unquote war chest of picks that they just got for the 11th pick, then I'd be like, wow, now you really just wasted a lottery pick to get rid of guys that you signed last offseason to sign someone new this year. So like this Brunson deal better work out in that case. But otherwise, yeah, it's not a big deal to me to move off the veterans, because ultimately we saw last year the Knicks aren't going to be hyper competitive for a while anyway. Most of these guys probably aren't going to be here on the next actually competitive Knicks team anyway. So it's not really worth, crying over spilled milk in that case.
Yeah, I'm with you on the veterans, except I would be irritated if Cam gets moved. I'm not. I'd be very upset if Cam gets moved, because I do want to see if he can contribute to this team. He plays a position that we need, which is why it's also frustrating during this past draft where it's like, oh, what do we need as a team? Wings. Oh, cool. So there's at least some solid wings that even if you miss out on Johnny Davis, there's at least like AJ Griffin. Maybe if you want to go like a tweener who has just like good basketball like skill sets in Tari Eason, right? Like these are the type of guys that we could have gone for. Even Jalen Williams, like that's another guy that the Knicks could have gone for if you wanted a wing, but yet we kicked the can down the road. And now if we have to move Cam Reddish just to clear up salary space, just to clear up cap space for Jalen Brunson, I'm going to be pretty irritated if he has to be moved in that type of deal, because the only way I'm even thinking about moving Cam is if I'm getting a better player in return. Like he's got to be part of like a different package deal than just shedding salary. So I'd be pretty infuriated if the Knicks do make a move like that. Jeff, how do you feel about these guys? Burks, Noel, Cam. We can even throw Fournier in there, as Alex said, because there's some rumors about him. Any of these guys that you're tied to, not tied to, that you don't want to see go? What are you thinking?
I would be frustrated if either Burks or Reddish were dealt. I think the reason I would be frustrated if Burks is dealt is more so what the deal surrounding him looks like, because this was a guy that had a really good season for us 2 seasons ago. We signed him to probably one of the most team-friendly deals in the league. And I would be frustrated that if his deal was traded into, let's say, the Boston trade exception or something like that, just for the purposes of not taking back salary, and we didn't get draft compensation, decent draft compensation. That would be tough to take, because I think Alec Burks is actually a really good player when he's used appropriately in his role. I like what he offers you on the court, and I think he actually plays well complementary to guys who might have a bigger usage rate or demand more of the ball. So if Burks is traded in a deal that looks like a pure salary dump just so that we can pay Jalen Brunson, that would kind of suck for me. And I would agree with you, Cam Reddish going out after we just spent a protected first on him. He plays a position of need. He's super, super talented, but hasn't put it together yet. Atlanta was really just in a catch and shoot role and just kind of playing off Trae Young with their second unit. There's a lot of potential there, and I'm not certain that Cam Reddish is going to realize his potential, but he deserves the chance and opportunity to do so. You talk to anybody that played with Cam in and around high school, and this guy was like an absolute stud. And I know people get tired of hearing that. Well, like, okay, great, he was really good in high school. But like guys who are good in the league now, we're like, no, Cam Reddish is the truth. So I would like to see him in a more advanced role for us. We'll see if that happens. But yeah, Nerlens Noel, I wouldn't be particularly pressed if we didn't have him anymore. I like Evan Fournier. I like the way he rebounded. He really struggled, ended up hitting the most threes in a season for us. I thought he generally did what we paid him to do. So I can't be too mad at him. But yeah, just off those guys that you've mentioned, Cam and Burks, especially if Burks just leaves as a pure salary dump, that would be frustrating for me.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement when it comes to Cam. Like, you can't just dump him for nothing. But hey, there's another guy that Begley was talking about that we're trying to see, because fans are looking. I know some fans are out there looking to get this guy off the team, with one Julius Randle. So, Daniel, if you could play the first clip of Ian Begley if Julius Randle would be moved this summer, please play that one.
I don't get the sense at all that the Knicks want to just dump Julius Randle just to get off of his salary, A, and B, whatever happens with Julius Randle, you could be sure, I'm pretty sure, that the Knicks will have him, in the loop on anything because of his relationship with Leon Rose and William Wesley in the front office. They're not going to just dump him to a place where he's going to be miserable. He'll be involved in the conversation on whatever his next steps are. I could be pretty confident in saying that.
All right. So for all you Julius Randle, I guess, haters out there that want this man off the team, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere anytime soon, or will he be moved unless it's to a destination that is, one that he signs off on, even though this is not like the Carmelo Anthony contract where Melo had to sign off on a trade. This is, as Ian said, this is Leon Rose, Worldwide West. This is their guy. We heard on the Woj pod how Randle met with Wes and Rose to make sure that he was situated on this team, to make sure that he had all the tools necessary to succeed. So it only makes sense that they're also going to make sure that he's treated right if he does leave New York. So, Jeff, I'm going to start you with this time. What do you think, man? Do you think let me ask you this. Do you think Randle gets moved this year? And let's start off with that.
I don't think so. I would say this, in terms of how I personally feel about Randle, I'm not an inhabitant on Randle Island, but I would say I'm on a boat slightly offshore. I think Julius Randle is still good at basketball. I don't think there's a lot of guys at his height and size that can do what he does. He had a miserable year for us and still averaged 20, 10, and 5. Granted, his shooting numbers were abysmal. And his attitude on and off the court there was a lot left to be desired. But I'm willing to bet that there's a big bounce back year in his future. I don't think he'll be all NBA level talent, but I think he genuinely enjoys playing here, even if his body language suggested otherwise. But I think he's going to be extremely motivated to prove to fans, to himself, that the Knicks were right in investing in him. So I guess that's somewhat of a long-winded way of saying, I would be shocked if Julius Randle is traded this year.
Yeah, I would be as well. Alex, are you on the same? Are you on that same boat with Jeff? Let me ask you that question.
My boat is further away from the island, that's for sure. I was speeding away at top speed from Randall Island, and then when I turned on the radio, I switched to idling, and I'm trying to talk myself into maybe going back, but I've already pushed the analogy too far. I think I'm kind of, I don't know. It's tough for me to separate myself from the on/off the court stuff with Randall last year. Not so much the play. I understand that guys sometimes, there was a lot of circumstances with Randall last year, and it was not dissimilar to his 1920 campaign, his first one with the Knicks, where it's the pressure of expectations and all that stuff. And he wrote in that Players Tribune article in 2021 that the pressure got to him in 1920, and his new contract, he felt he had to be the man, and this, that, the other, and he pushed it, and he tried too hard, and he turned the ball over too much or whatever. And now, I feel like that maybe happened again this year, in terms of him getting this big extension, putting a lot on himself. But I think his ego was also kind of inflated this year too, by maybe rightfully so, for getting all NBA and stuff. I mean, it was a big achievement. He had a legitimately awesome 2021. But once the fans got back in the building and you don't have that shooter's backdrop anymore, the shots stopped falling as much. And then we just saw so many bad tendencies show out on the court with the, not playing defense, not rotating, not getting back on defense, not looking to pass on a lot of possessions. There were certain games where literally he almost seemed like he was in protest, not getting to the rim at all. Like he was only taking jump shots. It was like he thought he was like Klay Thompson or something. And it's like that. You can't have that. You have to have a guy that's out there. If you're going to be making that money and you want to be the leader and you want to have this, that, and the other, you got to be out there, busting your butt every night and, setting a good example. And instead it felt like RJ was sort of that guy all of last year, which was also part of what irked Randle. Like the game and moment that sticks with me the most about him was the after the Chicago game where it was a comeback led mostly by the kids. Randle's first reaction, after a huge comeback win that was a lot of fun, was to slam the ball, go to the locker room without talking to anybody, and reportedly start saying that he wanted out, he wants to trade, this, that, the other right after the game. It's that's not what being a good teammate or whatever is about. You shouldn't be doing that. And I'm with what Jeff said, I can talk myself into yeah, he might have a bounce back season at some point, maybe with the Knicks, maybe otherwise. But I think it's going to require a big attitude adjustment for him going into this year, and I hope he's willing to do that. But if it happens again where they're trying to feature RJ more and he starts getting essentially pouty again, I'm going to be like, why did they not try harder to trade him during this offseason? Because I felt like that was the move. I just kind of, by the end of this season, I felt like, wow, you know what? It was a nice run and it was a heck of a fall from grace, but I feel like time's kind of up here. And now it seems like the Knicks are just kind of no, let's pump the brakes on that. We're going to hold on to him and see what happens. And fine, give it a shot. I think that he should have about the same leash as Tibbs at this point, where it's just here's your guidelines, do it, or else you'll be shipped out real quick. We'll just get you out of here one way or the other. Because they need to settle in on building something, and it's got to be, there's got to be certain tenets that they want to uphold, and especially in Randle's case, playing hard every night, not being a ball stopper, stuff like that has to be thing 1, 2, and 3 for him. So hopefully they're able to do that if they're not going to move him.
Yeah, and look, I think the biggest thing when it comes to looking at Julius Randle, right? And I don't think he'll have, let me first say this, I don't think he'll have as a catastrophic of a season that he did this past season. I think he'll bounce back. It won't be what we saw his second All-NBA team, most improved type season. I think it'll be somewhere in between, because that's kind of what he's been throughout his entire career. I think the three-point shot will take a slight dip, a slight jump. Same thing with his jumper. I think he'll come around to that. I think this was really another just hard moment for him. But when it comes to looking at Obi Toppin, the guy right behind him who's only been getting 15 minutes a game and who showed out towards the end of the season, that's the big question, is that if the Knicks are truly invested in guys like Quickly, Obi, Grimes, and all of them, then especially Obi, because if Tibbs is going to have a hard time playing both Randle and Obi, either you got to reduce Julius's role so that Obi gets more playing time, or you got to figure out ways to get them both on the court. And we know that Tom Thibodeau is one that doesn't want to give up rim protection, so that's probably going to be a no, that we're going to see him, Randle and Obi out of the court together. But you would think that the Knicks would try to figure out how to move Randle so that way to get Obi more playing time and to show that he actually does have value. Because when you see Leon Rose put out these statements and talk about the youth, and then you hear how the team is high on Quickly and Obi, well, how can you be high on a player if they're not getting enough playing time? So you got to see how you can get Obi some more playing time, especially the way he finished the season, as I said. But look, guys, we're going to reset one more time. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for KnicksFanTV, another episode of Knicks Weekly. All right, we got Jeffrey Campbell, Alex Wolf here with us, breaking down the draft, breaking down the upcoming free agency, all the news that we had this past weekend. So shout out to them. We got 1,600 watching us live right now, but we only got 558 likes. Come on, guys. Hit that thumbs up button for your boys. You got it. You got to support the channel. Make sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell. That way you know when a new show drops, okay? And also, we're sponsored by Manscaped. So make sure to go get your lawnmower 4.0, but no testimonials. No testimonials. We don't need, as CP would say, we don't need that. All right. We don't need that. Okay. None of that. All right. We got some super chats. So I want to say thank you. Shout out to John Kim, who gave us a $10 super chat. The ball dies when it gets to a ball hogger. Don't want to watch another season of him hogging it, trying to go left, then passes up to 2 seconds to shoot. New York City don't want him. Get him out ASAP. So we already know how some fans feel about one Mr. Julius Randle. We also got another super chat. We got one from Brandon Guest. Now that Jalen's dad is on payroll, do you think the family ties will handcuff the Knicks from looking for other free agent trade markets, point guards, such as Dejounte Murray? We actually didn't talk about Dejounte Murray. Do you think the Knicks are even in on Dejounte Murray? I hope they are, because I do like his game. Alex, what do you think? You're muted. I can't even hear you.
My bad. I muted for a second. Yeah, I don't think they are. I think that they're going to be. I think they're so far in on Brunson at this point that they're not going to even consider Dejounte Murray unless the price was like insanely low, which it's not going to be, because why would it be? Like, the Spurs aren't going to just give him away. That guy himself was a first-time All-Star this year, so like they're not going to be like lining up to just trade him for, pennies on the dollar. Also, though, I like Murray as a player to a degree, but I don't think he necessarily fits with the Knicks roster, especially if they're keeping Julius Randle. You don't want two guys out there that are going to be ball dominant that can't shoot threes. And in that regard, I think Brunson actually fits quite a bit better, because Brunson Murray needs the ball in his hands more to be successful, and he's good at it. I mean, he's sort of got a little, in a way, like a Russell Westbrook to his game, and I mean that as a compliment, like prime Russell Westbrook in some regards, in terms of the fact that he's breaking down defenses, kicking out shooters. He's like a solid like 18, 8, and 8 guy, which is really valuable. And if you want him to sort of be like the floor general of a team, that's great. But like when he's going to be playing with someone like Randle, who has shown a reluctance to be like the pick and roll, pick and pop type guy that he used to be on like New Orleans, for example, which like the cruel irony would be like, it was totally okay playing that role with Alfred Payton, but wouldn't be with Dejounte Murray. But that sort of just seems like where Julius is at with his headspace as far as where he thinks he's at in his career at this point and what he thinks his role should be. If that's the case, and they both are questionable shooters, or in the case of Dejounte, I'd say even more than questionable. I just don't think he's a good shooter, period. I wouldn't want to bank on that combo. I'd rather have a guy like a Brunson out there that maybe isn't quite the pure ball handler that Murray is, but that is going to be better as far as being able to generate a pull-up three or generate just a spot-up three. If Julius Randle is cooking in the post and kicks out to, Jalen Brunson, he's going to command defensive attention. Maybe that means that he attacks closeout. Maybe that means he just shoots a three. Maybe that means he starts to swing around the perimeter. But, he's going to be a lot more useful to the Knicks than Murray would be, despite the fact that maybe in a vacuum, Murray is the better, like, pure basketball talent. I think Brunson's a better fit. So I think that would probably be the direction that I would go. Although it is also worth noting, like, in all reality, Dejounte Murray is probably going to be making at least $6 or $7 million less than Jalen Brunson going into next season, if not even more than that, if not almost $10 million, because Dejounte did sign kind of a value deal. So another factor to consider, but all in all, I think I'm more in on Brunson from the basketball fit perspective than Murray at this point.
Interesting. Jeff, what about yourself?
I'm on the same page as Alex. I would say not only do I question the fit Murray has with Julius Randle, but next to RJ as well. Even though we've seen some shooting numbers for RJ, improve a bit here and there. He's always kind of up and down in that area over the season. But, in order for our offense, I think, to be really functional in the way that we want it to be, one of those two top perimeter positions we've got to have as close to a lights out shooter as we can. I just don't know if you can project Murray, even though he's young, to get significantly better in that area to offset whether it's Randle's inefficient shooting. I'm hoping that RJ is going to become more consistent in that area, but unless I could feel more confident in that, I probably agree with Alex, and I would take Brunson's fit as well.
Okay, I would actually like Dejounte Murray. I know the fit is kind of questionable, but I think he's young enough where he can still learn more and add more to his game. You want to talk about a guy who has a good in-between game, which this team needs, and a guy who can, even though Brunson is in a higher percentile finishing around the rim, according to Queen the Glass, Dejounte Murray's ability still to get downhill is still something that intrigues me. But I understand the fit, where if you're thinking about three guys who go downhill, can't really shoot well from three, we saw that this past season, kind of. Even if Kemba wasn't really the guy that he once was, it's if you don't have enough three-point shooters who are active enough behind the arc, I get that. I'd still move for Murray because of the contract, and I think he's still young enough where he can still add more to his game, even though he's shown that he's more on ball. But I think that's also just a product of the Spurs as well. And then I want to just say thank you for the last super chat. AGW with the $2 super chat. 27 million. Is that the value? Best year in a contract year and small? No, we're not saying that Brunson would get 27. We're saying that we'd have to open up 27 million more in the cap space, so that way the Knicks could sign him, Mitch, and whoever else they need to sign.
No,
But with that being said,
the reported deal is paying Brunson almost 27 million.
what? 27?
Yeah, I mean, if you do the math, like if it's 4 years, $110 million, that's like
Oh, you're right.
27.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 27
Yeah,
million.
you're right. Oh, you're right.
Now, granted, if you consider the scaling of that, the first year would not have to be that much, because you get, I think it's 10% raises or something like that, or 8%. So first year would probably be like 25 million or something like that, and then scale its way up to about 30 by the end of the deal. But it would average out to about 27 and a half if the 4-year, $110 million reported deal that's out there gets, struck. As far as Mitch, though, you don't actually have to create that much cap space. Right? Yeah, well, because of the bird rights, and then his cap hold is small, right? Because he was signed as a second-round pick, and he only made like $1.5 million on the final year of his deal or something like that. So his cap hold, I think, sits at like 125% of what his last year's salary was or something like that. His cap hold is like very, very small. So, you can hold off on sign. You can like agree to a deal with him and say, hey, we're going to give you 12 million a season or something. But for cap purposes, it'll only count as like 2 or 3 or whatever million on the cap sheet until the moment you sign that deal. So you can make your other moves and then say, okay, everything else is done. All right, Mitch, now you can sign. And now we'll go over the cap to sign you. So that's sort of how that all works. But yeah, the reported deal for Brunson is anywhere from 25 million to 27.5 million average annual value on the contract. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
I see people in the chat going wild here, and 27 million for Jalen Brunson. I will say this, with the CBA up in a few years and the expected cap to increase, that relatively would be small. Not that much small, but it would be small. Yeah. It would be smaller with regards to the percentage of the cap. It would be smaller.
As of right now, it's going to be about 25% of the cap, maybe slightly less than that, because the cap is going to be 122 million this coming year. It is supposed to, the NBA has like some, I think maybe by the end of this year, they have part of the CBA is expiring or something. And they're going to renegotiate some of their TV rights or something like that. And presumably with the way things are going, they're probably going to strike some big deals with some of the streaming platforms, whether it's like Amazon or Apple TV or something like that. And, because Apple TV is doing the MLB thing, and that seems to be working really well for them. So They may try to get in on the NBA action a little bit. So yeah, they are projecting that the cap is going to go up by a pretty decent amount in the next few years because of that.
Yeah, and you also got NFL with Amazon. But let's move on to our first caller. We got Michael. Michael, if you can unmute yourself. What's going on, Michael? You're with us on the live show. How you doing, man? What's your takes? Michael, are you there?
Yo, man. What's
What up,
this?
Michael?
Hey, I had to come back after what happened this draft, man. I don't know what. Like, I'm just gonna say quickly, man. It's just confusing me on how we just keep doing the same thing after a year that didn't work. So every normal team, right? If the next 5 years, a team makes the playoffs, gets bounced out the first round, doesn't make it the next couple of years, restart. You rebuild. You see what you got in your young talent. Okay, you try to build an all-star, superstar. Then you bring the free agents. Then you bring the upcoming pieces. But we don't even know if RJ is going to be a superstar yet. We don't even know what we have in Obi and IQ because of Tibbs. And what we're doing, we're bringing Jalen Brunson, 110 mil? Like he's I don't get it. I don't get it. Trading out the first round and tampering, getting Rick Brunson, Leon Rose's son, I'm pretty sure is his agent, tampering for Jalen Brunson. And what's that gonna do? Get us to the play-in? It's not doing anything. Every single time we suck, we either not have a first-round pick or we had just terrible luck in the lottery. But then when we do have luck in the lottery and we do have our first-round pick, we have, we draft RJ, KP, but we always mess it up. Well, because RJ now, well, you have Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, or RJ. What's that gonna do? And then KP has got injured. That doesn't count. That was just bad luck. But with RJ, you are having just wasting talent. You are wasting talent. You're not giving no time, no patience, and it's absurd. It's just crazy what we're doing. And that's what I have to say, man. I've been laying low, and then now the Knicks doing this, man. It made me have to come back, man. Hey,
Michael,
man,
don't worry. Thank you for calling in, Michael. Have a good one, Michael. Man, rookie of the year, Michael calling in. You can hear that he was distraught, upset. He took time off, he said. He's a teenager. He took time off from it. He used to call. He's rookie of the year, by the way, Alex, Jeff, if you guys don't know. He is rookie of the year because he come in with the passion, the fire. And he's coming with passion and fire today. You can hear in his voice. He's like us, Alex. All right? Like he was fueled, he was fired. He was fired up on draft night. Knicks decided to trade out, and now you can hear he's just lukewarm food just coming out of the microwave, chilling. You heard it in his voice today, man. And like, hey, Michael, you're young, man. You're young. You're not our age yet. Don't worry.
He's got lots of heartbreaks still to come. Lots of heartbreaks still to come.
A lot. So just remember, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a marathon. But yo, we got another caller. With us today. We got Sam on the Discord as well. Sam, if you can hear us, unmute your mic, man. What's going on? Sam, you in here? Sam
saying he's
what?
server muted, can't unmute.
Oh,
There
can't
we go.
unmute.
Hi.
There we go.
Thank you.
There he is.
What's up, guys?
What's up, Sam? How you go? What's going on?
Jalen Brunson is what's going on, and I'm not a fan of that move. I know a lot of people are saying like we need a point guard and stuff like that. I think it's contradicting to what Leon Rose says about player development and going with a youth core. Emmanuel quickly has an argument, despite I know the chat's going off right now about saying, oh, he's not a point guard. He can't play point guard. Yeah, well, I think he can. So I think you're trying to it's very hypocritical to bring in Jalen Brunson and talk about player development in that sense because you're taking away minutes for him. And we saw what Emmanuel quickly can do in those last 10, 15 games of that season. And I'm going to do what I do best and talk about stats right now because Jalen Brunson is being talked about a lot. And you have to really look at the two systems that the Mavericks have and the New York Knicks have. The Mavericks was one of the top teams in offensive rating, and the New York Knicks were at the bottom. And the big reason for that would be spacing. We're talking about Jason Kidd having a point guard understanding of spacing, and Tom Thibodeau, who likes to have Julius Randle stay on the block, and then Mitchell Robinson's also on the block. Jalen Brunson was known for his floater. That's where he got his points. That's where he was able to get his assist. And if you're going to have both these guys playing down the block, Jalen Brunson isn't going to get that floater off. He's not going to get his assist off because Julius Randle's probably going to be blocking that lane for him, going to be blocking that passing lane along with Mitch. It's just, and then you talk about the Mavericks and you have Luka Doncic, who's going to have a lot of gravity towards him, opens up a lot for Brunson. I don't know what the Knicks scouting department is looking at. They're looking at maybe the player itself, but you're not looking at the systems as well. You know, I've said this multiple times about how much I don't like Tibbs. Even in our winning season, like, he was good, like, it was okay, but the offensive schemes that he runs is not well put together. And so when you're gonna have Jalen Brunson come in, it's just not gonna work because this guy has the floater going for him, and yes, he could shoot, but you need a more modern point guard. Jalen Brunson, most of his shots were within 3 and 10 feet, I want to say, because he had that floater. I think Emmanuel Quickley is more on the modern point guard side, where you have a guy that could shoot the ball. And when you have Jalen, I mean, you could even look at like the on-offs for Jalen Brunson. Even when Jalen Brunson's on the court, it's not that big of a jump. Your offensive rating goes up maybe 5 points. Emmanuel Quickley, on a worse team, when he's on the court, its an offensive rating jumps up by 7 points. That's huge. And then, even then, Jalen Brunson, most offensive stats go down when he's on the court, mostly because Luke is on the court and stuff like that. But then you have Emmanuel Quickley, who's just improving on everything. I really think that Jalen Brunson's not the guy, especially if you're going to pay him $27 million.
Hey, I mean, Sammy gave a lot.
Yeah, if I may just react to that real quick. I mean, I don't really buy that Brunson's not a shooter.
I'm not saying he's not a shooter. I'm just saying that he's not.
But you said Quickley shoots, which Brunson doesn't do.
I'm saying that Quickley shoots more than Brunson.
But he doesn't really. I mean, Brunson is like a 40% 3-point shooter. I have reservations too about giving him that big of a contract, if I'm being honest. But I don't know. I do think that, like, so let's just say in a vacuum here, like if I just threw stats out, that there was a player who had 21.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 47% shooting overall, 35% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. Also was giving you, let's see, in the advanced categories here, all that 21.5 points per game on only 22% usage with 24% assist percentage. I mean, that's what Brunson did in the playoffs this year, and he was quite impactful. I'm not like, I literally just said, like, I don't want to block Emmanuel Quickley. That said, I don't think that adding Brunson is necessarily like a automatic negative move. I don't think that it's going to immediately be like a bad contract or something. I think that there's a real chance that we're looking at a guy who is actually like in the process of breaking out. I mean, he's gotten very consistently better throughout his career. He's around a 40% 3-point shooter. He shoots, stationary, pull up, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think that his inside the 3-point line package just boils down to floaters, which, as much as I love Emmanuel Quickley, like, he's just learning how to have his inside the 3-point package not boil down to floaters. I think Brunson's already sort of figured that out to many degrees there.
Alex, I want to put in there as well real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
I was just going to say, just to kind of piggyback on that, I mean, one point that the caller brought up that I did think was good was the difference in spacing between the Mavericks offense and the Knicks offense and how we can maybe project that Brunson would do on this team. But the other thing that I would say to counteract that, I think he said specifically like he wouldn't be able to necessarily get to the rim with Mitch and Randle kind of on the block. But if you watch the way that Derrick Rose would kind of close games for us with those two guys in the lineup, neither of those guys really prevented him from getting to the rim. So I don't think it would be too much of a deterrent, but I do think it's something to think about. The fact that the Mavericks, at least historically, have been more of like an analytically based team. They tend to do a lot of roster moves and lineups that are more analytically inclined. So I know we're like kind of beefing up that department since Leon has come, but I do think it's certainly a talking point, I think, to see their spacing compared to ours, which I think if I read the last time, ours was one of the bottom in the league. So definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks to Sam for calling in and giving his takes. And like, look, I understand the reservations of Brunson, especially if you're for Emmanuel Cuckoo, like all of us are. I think the one thing that he did point out is definitely the offensive system. And Jeff, you were elaborating more on that. I agree with you. I would just be more interested to see how it runs with a Tom Thibodeau-led system, which really isn't a lot of offensive creativity, right? So will Brunson's shooting help the team? Absolutely. It'll help open up for like RJ and Randall if they're on the team, and even Mitch. Will it be creative as the Mavs? I think that's the bigger question, where if it's getting a lot of people involved, a lot of touches, more pick and rolls, that's what we really need to see, is more pick and rolls on this team. That's the question I have. But thank you for all of our callers calling in. And look, guys, that's it. That's the show. So thank you Knicks Nation for tuning in on the show. Thank you for supporting us. We're ending out with 1,400 viewers, so thank you. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys before you leave. All right, make sure to do so, as Alex is properly giving the gesture for. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. We're sponsored by Manscaped. Make sure to go out and get your lawnmower 4.0. And guys, before we tune out of here, Alex, Jeff, start off with you, Alex. Let these guys know, what our listeners know, where they can go find you.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're here on YouTube and want to drop a quick subscription over on the Locked On Knicks channel, we put out 5 shows a week. So if you really can't get enough of Knicks stuff, definitely myself, my co-host Gavin, and host of good guests we try to bring on during the off season. We put out a lot of content over there, so definitely check that out. Check out the Strickland, the Strick.land, or the Strickland on Twitter. That's the website that I run, and we have lots of great coverage coming there too. We had some really good draft stuff that we put out that unfortunately got washed away into the sands of time. But, we have great post-draft stuff, some good free agency stuff coming up as well on the website there, as well as some great podcasts from Schwinny Poo and others, if you're familiar with Schwinn. So definitely check us out at the Strickland. And, I think that's all I got for today.
Make sure to go check out the Strickland, the Strick.land. Make sure to go check out Locked On Knicks. Go support Alex Wolf and the crew. And then Jeff, what the listeners know where they can find you as well.
Yeah, mostly on Twitter, rambling and whatnot. That's Jeff, GEOFF_boy_RD. I write for KnicksFanTV, Daily Knicks as well. Anything Knicks related, mostly draft this time of year, but I'm sure I'll be putting a lot of off-season stuff coming up as well.
For sure. That's Jeff. You can go find him. Like I said, he's our draft expert at KnicksFanTV.com. Make sure to go check out his work there and go support all of our other writers over at KnicksFanTV.com. Okay, we got a bunch of great writers over there putting out content as usual, covering the draft, covering everything that's Knicks related. Make sure to go over there. And once again, thank you, Knicks Nation, for tuning in. Salute to all the mods. Salute to Knicks Nation. Look, make sure, if you're not tuning in right now, like I say, you can find this podcast on all audio listening platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. You can go find Knicks Fan TV. You can take this show on the road, all right? We're not on the road, but you can take the show on the road. So make sure to support, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, all right? And salute, everyone. We'll catch you later.